Ceasefire, goddammit!
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Metacast podcast. That is the podcast that explores itself, explores ourselves, and explores the self in general. My name is Ty. I'm going to be one of your co-hosts.
And I am Distance. Some call me a baby killer. I just say I did what I had to.
Did you have to kill the baby, though? Oh, man, that's... I don't know what you did.
What the hippies called me when I came home.
Fucking hippies. And tonight is the Metacast movie show about Platoon. Platoon is a 1986 war film. It's written and directed by Oliver Stone.
It's starring Tom Berenger, Willem Dafoe, Charlie Sheen, and Forrest Whitaker.
With a budget of only $6 million, this had a box office take of $138.5 million.
With a tomato meter rating of 88% with an audience score of 93%.
The film, whose events are loosely based on Stone's own experience in the Vietnam War, follows Private Taylor while serving in Vietnam. And the film is what I would call an understated film. It's mostly about the conduct and overall morality of war. So it's kind of hard to give it just a plot synopsis. Now, this movie, I realized watching this, the problem that I have watching some older movies. I definitely struggled with some of the enjoyment of this. Now, not to say that this isn't a great movie. This movie is amazing, but it does show its age. And I do think it shows the smaller budget. The fact that this was only, $6 million, which I guess in 1986 is quite a bit more. However, at least for me, I've noticed with older movies like this, I think what ends up happening is my immersion tends to break a little bit, and that's the part that kind of draws me out of it. But with that being said, this movie is still amazing, still great, still explores a lot of important ideas that are incredibly important to think about. So if I have to give this a verdict, yes or no, should you watch it? I enjoyed watching this. I feel like it's important to watch this because I'm someone that is trying to learn and appreciate film more, especially as someone who is a co-host on a podcast that explores film. So I think that I need to watch this. The general population, though, I would give this a yes. However, there are many movies that explore the same concepts. I think that it is important to think about these things, not necessarily see exactly especially in this movie precisely, but still, yeah, I'm going to give it a yes. How do you feel?
Starting off, I am ashamed at the fact that I not only am someone that likes movies, I grew up watching movies. It was part of like my routine every couple weeks. We'd go rent movies when I was a little kid. I worked at Blockbuster when that was a thing. I'm now the co-host on a podcast that talks about movies, and I've never seen this movie. I'm ashamed of that fact, honestly. And I'm really sad that I waited this long, because this movie, I'm not going to say I enjoyed every minute of watching it, but I think that this is something important for people to kind of see. And part of the reason why I said what I said in the intro was partially because I just say off-color shit every time, but also a lot of the hate that people got when they came back from this war and the things that some individuals chose to do, and a lot of the anti-war people, instead of blaming the people who sent the people off to war, who decided this was a necessary military campaign, they blamed the people that were in it. And for me, I think this is an important movie to watch as an American, because you can understand in some ways that the people overseas in Vietnam thought they shouldn't be there just as much as the people did here. And you can see some of the more atrocious side of war. You can kind of see how miserable Vietnam really was for the people there, and for younger people like us that weren't even alive anywhere near when Vietnam happened. I think it's a great movie to get a little perspective on what happened there, at least a little bit, and maybe even to push you to learn a little more about the war and what happened. By the way, great documentary series on Netflix about the Vietnam War. Can't remember the name of it, but watch that if you haven't. So for this one, I think it's a yes, particularly if you're American, because this is something that it's a perspective and an experience that if you haven't had, it's good to have some kind of idea of what things felt like. I mean, there's nothing like really being there, but I think it's a good mix of weird shit that was going on. And they seem to make a point to kind of touch every relevant experiential point.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You ready to start getting into the actual the meat of this story? You want Spoiler Terry to pop out?
I want to see Spoiler Terry. All right. He's my dude.
All right, we'll bring Spoiler Terry out of here. All right, so well, and that does. Excuse me. Sorry. One of the things you said does bring me to a question that I'm thinking of. So we both agreed that it's important to at least think about the concepts of this movie. Can you think of other movies that explored the same kind of topics, or was this movie kind of more unique in the topics that it explored in your mind?
Tropic Thunder, man. I'm kidding. One of us had to make the joke. There's not a lot of movies that can you recall any movies about Vietnam? Black Hawk Down is okay, but it's focused on a different military campaign, and I think that I don't know. I had some problems with Black Hawk Down. It tried to make all the Somalis look really, really bad.
My mind immediately goes to Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah, Full Metal Jacket I think is probably a good example, but I don't, because the Full Metal Jacket is interesting because I think a lot of it centers around training. And maybe like how fucked up the training actually kind of was. Like you didn't really get trained.
Well, yeah, then, where does the training end and the brainwashing start? Is I think a lot of what that looks at. Yeah.
They call it indoctrination.
Yeah. Yep. Which did you ever see? You saw Jarhead, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that goes into that a lot too. Which I thought, like, again, different theater, but but still very interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff is interesting because you have to. We all grow up being taught hurting people and killing people is wrong, and we're never really taught any gray area there. And then you have to sort of like figure out a way to say, well, temporarily for a little while, this thing you were told to never ever do is okay for you to do. And there's not really a lot of good ways to do it. The major problem that I have with the way that particularly combat people are taught is that there isn't a lot of help readjusting.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing that stands out to me is like you're pointing out, the idea that I think is told to a lot of people, and the way they make that dichotomy or that division in thought makes sense is violence or killing is not acceptable in our society here. There are people that want to threaten our society, so it's okay to be violent or kill them. But whenever that connection is not directly clear to the person that comes home from war, especially, that's what I noticed with a lot of my friends that were vets, especially from Iraq or Afghanistan. It was like they did not feel coming home like they were doing anything that was protecting our way of life. It was more that like they were more questioning, was like, why was I there? Like, was this about oil, about something else that I don't really understand, or was I protecting our way of life in some way?
Yeah, and there's a lot of I think there's a lot of existential dread attached to it because you are very close to the people that you're deployed with.
Yeah.
And you feel like while you're there that you are doing a thing, that there's a purpose to your existence. And, in some ways it's just, getting home alive to the people that care about you. And, it's like, I think that, Vietnam in particular, because of the when you look at desert or brutal rainforest, well, if you're not used to that in the place where you live, it's gonna suck. It's not a nice place to be, and you do have to just have that feeling of what the fuck am I doing here? And you know, it's
and plus, not to mention, like, it not to make it seem like it wasn't so bad for some people that were deployed, but there are parts of Afghanistan that are beautiful. It's not all desert, like, so it's like compared to brutal rainforest, like, yeah, there are some areas that the at least the environment would be much more accommodating or welcoming.
Yeah, there's some mountainous regions. I think, was it Korengal is the name of it?
That sounds
There's like
right.
a valley. There's like a valley area in Afghanistan that the weather is really nice, but the combatants are particularly good at fighting and know the terrain. So, but yeah, you know, it's, and also I don't want to just like, I don't want to like have this like stereotype of like this poor wounded soldier who's come home and can't readjust. Not everybody has issues. Some people come home and they're fine. It's just all about kind of, I guess, who you are already and what happens and how it really affects you. Not everybody comes home and is like in a worse place mentally than they started. There are many people that come home from deployment and they're just fine.
I think the one thing across the board is I think everyone would come home in a different mental state. Whether or not it's like, not everyone is harmed, but yeah, it definitely changes everyone.
Right. Yeah, it'll 100% change you. I mean, there's no avoiding that. And you know, one of the best definitions that I've heard of post-traumatic stress is it's when your brain changes to adapt to a situation and then it has difficulty changing back. So
that's interesting.
Like,
yeah.
You know, but there's a lot of people, like I had a friend that I worked with like 3 or 4 jobs ago, and she drove like supply trucks during a Desert Storm. And she would like do this weird thing. And because Desert Storm was at that point was 20 years in the past, maybe ish, 15, 20 years. But she would still like kind of do this thing where she'd like sort of like look at the sides of the road in this really weird kind of way when she was driving.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And like one day I asked her about it, and she just said that it's something that she got used to driving, like the trucks that she drove, because she had cargo that was necessary. And if you read Art of War by Sun Tzu, the enemy supply lines are a big thing to target. So it was like, it was strange to me, but I mean, it wasn't like that I thought there was anything wrong with it. It was just different. But I was like, I just said like, you know, well, why do you still do that? She's like, I don't know, I just do. I was like, okay.
That is interesting though. The idea of that, it's like, you know, it's not that hard to form a habit. And then more often than not, it's not that hard to break a habit, but sometimes it's like the brain may have trouble getting rid of certain things, especially things like that may have been a literal life and death thing in a certain situation. Like, does the brain just value that as like, no, we're gonna hold on to that habit. Like, let's not get rid of that one.
You know, there's a point in the movie, I forget which character it is, but there's a point in the movie where I think he's talking to Taylor and he says, you know, the best you can do is just survive or get out alive or something like that.
Yep.
And I think that in war, that's kind of, I really think maybe it is all you can do, like no matter what you're doing exactly, just to kind of like get through it and get home.
Yeah. I mean, well, if you're at that level of like infantry or like, you know, I mean, that's not a general's job or, you know, anything like that. But
there's plenty of jobs where like you're using a forklift and loading trucks. Like you're not, just like any job that you have as a civilian, except you work for the military. But you know, it's kind of funny because a lot of things that individuals want to demonize others for is that I think one of the things that ends up being traumatic for some people is not what other people did to them in war, but what they figured out they were capable of doing. And a lot of this stuff is like the things that you see happening, like mistreating or torturing enemies, killing civilians, even like raping people. Some of these are things that you do when you are under a lot of stress, and it's almost like sort of perverse kind of stress relief to do like awful things to other people. And it's something that can happen to you when you get in a place that's that bad, where you're constantly worried about getting burned up by napalm or getting blown up by an RPG or getting shot in the head or having your limbs blown off by a trap. That it's something that I think everybody wants to paint this noble picture of themselves in every situation. They think that everything that happens, no matter what, they'll always be the best, wonderful, most moral person ever. Like, if I was in Nazi Germany, I never would have been with the Nazi party. Like, I would have resisted that. If I were in the South, I would have been against slavery. Even in the 19th century, I would, maybe this is a poor example, but if I were a Jew in the whatever biblical period, like in the New Testament, like I wouldn't have wanted to kill Jesus. Like, nah, you probably just would have gone with the crowd in every situation. You know, like everybody wants to think that in a situation where, like, okay, here's a very mild example. When you are at work and you're about our age, you know, mid 20s to mid 30s, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And you're with a group of usually older men, maybe 50s, and they start saying like things about how good some woman's butt looks that you work with. Oh, hey, it's guy talk, man. And you want to think that you're going to be the dude that's going to speak up and tell these four like older guys, hey, look, man, that's disrespectful as hell. Don't say that shit about women, especially not ones we work with. But most people will just bite their tongue and tuck their tail between their legs and say nothing. They wouldn't have the courage to say like, look, dude, that's not cool. They'd probably just laugh along with the whole situation and act like it was all hardy-har, you know?
But because that's what I think that the more interesting question is, not the fact that, like you said, it's pointing out it's going with the crowd. The question is, where does that come from to begin with? Where, you know, like, and then why does it become a mob mentality thing? And then I do think that even like the movie, you know, points out that there is the like Taylor is the one that stands up and, you know, says, you know, points out that like we're acting, you know, wrong or whatever. So there is like, in many situations in life when that happens, there is someone that realizes and calls it to people's attention. But like you're talking about, it is definitely more rare.
Yeah, it's like, and you know, like in this film, like not just Taylor, but like the Elias and Barnes struggle. It is so often that sort of thing doesn't happen.
Yeah, that
there isn't an Elias there to say, hey, what the fuck are you doing? And then a bunch of civilians just get slaughtered. I mean, there's countless situations in which during military occupation, bad things, like really, really, really bad things happen to the indigenous population and nobody seems to care. And it's like, it is scary to think that, you know, who is it? Actually, I think it was one of the quotes that I did in the last year's theme for the podcast, that everybody wants to think that there's some like evil group of, I'm paraphrasing and butchering the fuck out of this, but everybody wants to think that there's some evil group of people that if only we could eliminate them from our society, everything would be great. But the reality is that good and evil is this thing that bisects every human being. It's something that lives in all of us. It's not just something that there's just some group of people that are just evil and everyone else is good and those people need to be eliminated. Everybody has a propensity, or at least a capability, toward things that are evil given the right circumstances.
Well, and there's also there's this tendency that happens just kind of in disagreements, at least what I've seen in modern times. So often people think something is evil when it's really just other people doing their own best interests. And because you disagree, it's like, now that's evil. But it's like they're not doing anything malicious or evil. They're literally just doing what they think is best. But because you disagree, it comes across to you as evil.
Yeah, I mean, there are some countries that are a little closer to pure socialism than the U.S., and a lot of the time we'll look at that and call it evil because it's not what we do and it doesn't work for us.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe there's in other countries where they're a little closer to pure socialism that maybe it works better for them.
Yeah.
You know, and it is often, and honestly, like that's one of the major reasons for Vietnam was because we thought of communism as some plague, and that we have to get out here. We have to stop these commies from spreading their disease. And, you know, honestly, we can never do the experiment of what would the world be like without Vietnam.
Yeah.
We'll never be able to do that. But, you know, like it's funny because we talked about this movie to begin with as more of a theme movie than a plot movie, and so far we've pretty much only talked about themes.
Exactly. Yeah, we haven't really like touched. I mean, really, you know, we could go through stuff in the plot, but like, honestly, there's not. You know, okay. So how do we spoil this movie if we wanted to? Like, if Spoiler Terry was really gonna like, what would his Platoon shirt say? You like, I mean, I guess it's Taylor kills Barnes. But it's like, even that, like, that doesn't do anything, you know, like, I don't know.
Yeah. Some people die. Like, well, it's a war movie. Nobody actually wins. Oh, wait, it's a
Vietnam.
War movie.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I don't really think there are any spoilers on this one, honestly. Yeah. I mean, like, it's because a lot of it is just like seeing the awful shit that like kind of occurred. And I really, really believe that the creators, I think that Oliver Stone's purpose was to get people to talk,
of course, yeah,
for people to have conversations about what happened. There is one thing I thought that was really funny, the part where Taylor is like, it's one of his voiceovers of writing Grandma a letter. He's like, towns you've never heard of. I used to live in Brandon, Mississippi.
That's funny. That
it's
actually
right outside
is funny.
of Jackson. It's not that unknown.
I don't know if I've heard of Jackson, Mississippi. I don't know if I've heard of Jackson. Mississippi.
You've heard of isn't that the place between the one place and the other place?
It's a river, right? Like there's not actually like cities on the river though, right?
It is a river. There's a lot of cities on it.
No, that's just weird. That's just fucking weird.
You're in denial about Mississippi.
I felt it's like I was gonna give that one of those, but it really deserved this one. Linger in it. This is what you deserve. But no, okay. So, go ahead.
In some ways, I feel like Mississippi is a state that everybody kind of forgets.
That's fair. I mean, in all fairness, I was born in West Virginia, so I completely understand.
But everybody remembers West Virginia,
but for the wrong reasons.
I know.
For all the wrong reasons. But okay, so no, if we did want to actually talk about like some like plot points in the movie and everything, like I do have a few notes here that there was stuff in the movie worth talking about that was face value. I mean, I did think the first ambush was a very cool scene that was done well.
Mm-hmm.
The whole exchanging blame and like who fell asleep and everything, and like, was it Junior? Like I thought that was kind of like one of an interesting idea, that it's like in that situation the truth really doesn't matter in that moment. Like it's not a point to be like it was really Junior. Like it's like it doesn't fucking matter. Like,
yeah, I mean, some people got killed, and I mean that you have to do something about that now and get them back. It's like there is a point where blame doesn't really matter anymore, and it should be a situation where everybody kind of learns. But you know, it's one of the most difficult human needs or urges to resist is sleep. It may be the most difficult one. So it's one of those situations where, when, you know, as Taylor explains, they're operating on such a compromised level of sleep that, I mean, I'm sure that there are situations where that occurs. Kind of a weird thing to say. Is it just me, or has Willem Dafoe kind of always looked like an old man?
I don't know. I thought he looked young and handsome in this movie. I was impressed with how young he looked, actually. But
Really?
Yeah, I was it threw me off. But he does. I will agree with you that he was probably like, I wonder what age he was in this movie.
Yeah, I mean,
because like I mean he was probably only like
structure.
50 in this movie when this movie was filmed, right? So he looked good for 50. Hold on, no, he was
50.
Okay, he was 30 when this movie was filmed. Never mind. Okay, yeah, he has always looked like an old man. Yeah, I thought he was like maybe in his like upper 40s. Yeah, okay, so yeah, he looks older. But his skin is flawless in this movie though.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's got that collagen going on.
No, I do. I love Dafoe though. I thought he was great in this movie. I've always been a fan of his. And like you brought out, being kind of embarrassed that I've never seen this movie before, a little ashamed. I can't believe I saw Tropic Thunder first. And like the scene with the helicopter, it's like I wish I could have seen the original first just to appreciate that scene a little more.
And you know, there was one thing that people talked about, but that people still talk about a lot about Vietnam, was that Vietnam, on one side of things, was one of the first times where white Americans and black Americans were forced to be in close proximity to each other.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
in some ways, it may have been a way for people to dispel some of the prejudices they had by reducing the degree of ignorance that they had. But there's still, you can still see some of the tensions between the people based on race, and several of the characters were, the black characters did speak about how they felt as if they were sort of in some way just kind of, well, serving the white man is really like what a lot of them seem to sort of say. And I reckon that there was probably some degree of sentiment like that from many of the black men that were serving in Vietnam. I'm sure that wasn't just something that Oliver Stone made up.
No, I mean, that's still a sentiment. I mean, and still to today with it. I mean, just even, I know it's even across the board, just it's serving the rich. You know, even when it's a poor person, you know, going off to war, they still feel the exact same way. But yeah.
And I mean, Taylor has the conversation with the, you know, two of the other enlisted men that, you know, I thought that it wasn't fair that, you know, only poor people had to come over here and do this. Yeah. And one of them even kind of said, like, kind of sarcastically said something about him being like, "Oh, aren't you so like noble?" Like, that's only something.
I think it said like, "Oh, we got a crusader" or whatever, like something like that. Yeah.
And there's even the part where it's like, you know, rich men have always been taken advantage of poor men or something like that. I don't think they said men, I think he said people, but rich people have always been taking advantage of poor people or something along those lines. And, you know, it's like, it's a generalization that's an overgeneralization, but people say things like that for a reason.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it is just, I mean, it is the bare bones, like, truth of any system of capitalism and any, like, you know, if you can pay someone to do a job that you don't want to do, and there's someone that has a higher demand for money than you do, then they are willing to do it. It's like that is where that comes from. And it can lead to exploitation. It can, you know, on the far extremes of that, you know, it can become very dangerous, but it literally is just, it's the same as if you want to hire the neighborhood kid to cut your grass because you don't feel like it.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, well, the neighborhood kids, well, you know, the neighborhood kid. I'm not going to say I didn't mow lawns when I was a kid. I needed that money more than they did, and they didn't give me much. But it's okay. I only needed enough money to buy a new Batman action figure, and man, was that Batman cool.
Did you actually... Ow. Did you just slam that? Did you actually, like, as a young kid, cut grass?
Well, no, actually, it wasn't even. I didn't even do it for. So some kids like got an allowance, like they were just given money to spend every month. I had to mow I had to mow the lawn so many fucking times to make $5.
That sucks.
That was just my parents, like mowing.
That sucks.
Our lawn. I mean, I didn't really. There were a few times where I tried to mow some of the neighbors' lawns, but they wouldn't even pay me. They were like, "No."
What? Oh man.
I was like, "What?"
I had a little like neighborhood business.
I was like 9.
Oh, so okay. Well,
maybe they thought it was like child labor or something.
I guess, maybe.
I mean,
That's still
it might have been an ethics thing.
Ethically, I can't pay you for this. I need you to just do this for free. That seems strange to me. It's okay. It's either child labor or slavery. When it's unpaid, or I guess it could be like, what is it, indentured servitude, maybe.
I mean, to some degree, that's kind of what I was doing for my parents.
Basically, yeah.
We're giving you a place to live, so you have to work. Which, I mean, obviously, I'm saying that loosely and sarcastically, but
exactly. Like, I would be so guilty if I paid you for this. Like that would just be wrong if I were to pay you. We can't do that.
We're gonna need you to do it out of the goodness of your heart. So
I had a middle school business where I cut all the lawn, or not all the lawns, but quite a few lawns in the neighborhood. It was like $25 a piece, and that was like actually good money. I felt like a little entrepreneur. I went into Microsoft Word and used clip art and word art to make like a little poster that I hung up on the light posts and everything too.
$25. Those must have been some bougie motherfuckers in your neighborhood.
Yeah, dude. And I got $25, and I didn't even do the weed whacking. That was just, it was $25 for just lawn, cutting the lawn.
Man, well,
those were good days.
Nice. I mean, yeah, the economy was really booming for lawn mowing back in those days. Yeah, there is one of the remarks that Elias makes in a private conversation he's having with Taylor is about believing in what they're doing. He says that Barnes believes in what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And Taylor, I believe, asked Elias, well, do you believe in it? He said, in 65, yeah. Now, no. And I think that was 68 when the movie was taking place.
Mm-hmm.
That there was this idea of, I'm going to go serve my country. And then when you get there and you've done it for a little while, you recognize, am I really, like what you're saying earlier, like, am I really serving my country? This disillusionment that many of them had.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, in training and in everything leading up to that, you're being sold a certain idea that you're going to go there and do something great for your country. And then I'm sure the reality of your experience when you're there doesn't seem to coincide with that. Yeah.
There is one thing that I found really strange, that the scene where 4 or 5 of the soldiers are I guess attempting to sexually assault a young girl in the village, there's a really weird thing that one of them says, and the line really, really, really bothers me.
I think it's my favorite line.
Which one?
The line you're talking about. I'm pretty sure it's the one I picked for my favorite line. Go ahead. I'm sure it's it.
Oh, okay. All right. So when Taylor comes and essentially stops them, one of them asks him if he's a homosexual.
Yep. That's okay. So I'm joking. That's not actually my favorite line, but I did know that was like exactly the line you were talking about. Yep.
What a weird fucking thing to say.
Well, yeah, because you're actually literally at that moment cock blocking. So you must be gay if you prevent this other guy from raping someone. That's the only reason, right?
I guess maybe in 1968, it was just a weird fucking thing to say.
Well,
and the thing is it was a line. Someone wrote that line, so it was kind of like.
No, I think that's the point. I mean, I think the line was well written because it is supposed to make you say, like, holy shit, people think like that. Like there's people out there that would think like that.
But yeah, there seemed to be some situations where there were, when they kind of raid that one village looking for VC.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think they found any.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there weren't any really there.
Yeah.
That it seemed that I'm sure that many people there, or at least some people, viewed the Americans present there as tyrants, murderers, or like terrorists even.
Yeah.
And
every single villager from that village that survived that day. Yeah.
And when you put people that aren't necessarily terribly well trained in an environment and a climate that they're not used to, deprive them of sleep and put them in extremely stressful situations, I don't know you can expect them to handle themselves in the best way possible.
That's the basically what I've heard explained to me is how we constantly just keep creating the next generation of terrorists in the Middle East, basically, is by having the troops there that do similar to things in Vietnam, go to a village to try to find, insurgents, possibly behave really poorly. And then you have a generation that grew up seeing that, and all they know of American forces or America is literally, these troops that came in and ransacked their village, and they grew up around that. And then they it's very easy for them to become radicalized against America because that's the experience they've had.
Yeah. And, so I could say that in the US, if you have there's an example in when we did that episode on Imperium with Daniel Radcliffe in it.
Yeah.
There was the one like teenager basically, or maybe early 20 something, that he said that a couple black kids beat him up at school, and so then he just decided that all black people were like that.
Yep.
Like in your own country, that doesn't make any sense because you can have many other experiences, and he probably had, and he probably continued to have many experiences that were to the contrary of that idea. That's just because you experience that every day.
However,
you can choose to.
Yes, yeah. I was just gonna say the human mind is very good at like ignoring evidence to the contrary of what you want to see.
Right. And so you can choose like to view things like that. But the problem is that overseas, you don't have an opportunity to really meet a lot of other Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And is there ever going to be a situation where you see like an American Marine that does something super cool or super kind to someone around you? I mean, how often do they even have the opportunity to do that? And every other time you see an American soldier, are they just going to kind of be walking around doing their job, like, whatever patrol that they're doing?
Yeah.
Are you ever going to have an opportunity to see anything to the contrary? And probably not.
Exactly.
That's your only.
Yeah. And I would argue, like, if you've had a negative experience, you're gonna assume most, you're gonna assume the worst. And I would argue most what should be neutral experiences, you would then view as negative simply because they weren't positive enough to change your perspective, I guess.
Yeah, like you might even perceive a plain look on someone's face as a dirty look.
Exactly. Yep.
Or you might think of neutral body language as aggressive.
Yep.
or dismissive. Like there's all kinds of things. Like you're not going to remember the time you were at the grocery store and there was someone on a sport bike riding up and they stopped, put their foot down, and stopped the car behind them specifically to allow you to cross the parking lot with your 3 kids because they were doing something. You're going to remember the guy on the sport bike zooming down the highway, weaving in and out of traffic. You're not going to remember the one dude that did that tiny little nice thing. It's going to be the jackass,
Yep.
You're not going to have
all the BMW drivers we remember. We don't remember the BMW drivers that go just the speed limit and act normal. We remember the assholes. Yeah.
Yeah, not the one that lets you in the terrible, road entrance from like a store that, not that person. It's always going to be the jerk that you remember. And I think that I kind of wonder sometimes if that is a survival instinct that we have, that when you assume the worst when something bad happens. Cause if for instance, a cat tries to eat a centipede and they get stung. I don't know how centipede venom affects cats, but just for the sake of argument, we'll just say it causes them pain. The next time that a cat sees a centipede, they'll probably leave it the fuck alone because they got stung last time, and that's a good thing for their survival. Or a bear that had a specific experience, thought that they were honeybees, but it turns out it was a hornet's nest. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure the bear will have some idea of what the hornet's nest looks like, and he won't mess with it next time because all hornets are bad and they all sting you. And that's actually a I mean, a
And
true statement for the bear.
Their honey sucks too.
Yeah,
It's not even that good.
Honey's terrible. It tastes like fucking paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like not necessarily like, or or even like for humans, you're in the woods and you're with your uncle and your dad and your brother, and your uncle gets bit by this snake, and it's a highly venomous snake, like, I don't know, let's say a copperhead or something. And so from then on, every time you see a copperhead, you stay the fuck away from it because of that one bad thing that happened. So in many cases, it's a good instinct.
Well,
but
I would say in that situation, not to like, I think your point is great, but I think the analogy better is like, your uncle gets bit by a copperhead. Anytime you see a snake, you know to avoid them. And because it's like, that's the thing is, I think that there's not really a detriment to assuming the worst. Maybe you miss out on a few friendly snakes, but is that really like, you're not really missing out on much. You're avoiding situations that could possibly be dangerous. So I think that's really what it is. We learn, and it has to be a survival instinct. We learn where a situation could possibly have danger, and then we know that it's like, okay, let's avoid. Even when that situation could be benign, we know to at least be stay alert.
And you'll see the same thing like happen. There was actually an episode of the series Mad Men that takes place. The show starts out in 1960, that year, and there's a guy that fought in World War II, and he is extremely prejudiced against Japanese people. Because the only experience he had was fighting Japanese people in the Pacific.
Yep.
So, I mean, the same thing happened. And at that time, there weren't a whole lot of immigrants here. Like, you weren't guaranteed to meet somebody, because like now we've got like third and fourth generation people living here from Southeast Asian countries of many, many types. So it kind of goes both ways when you go to another country and that's the only exposure you have, that you have this idea like, oh, you look like the people that I fought. And that might even be another example of post-traumatic stress.
True.
But it's I wonder how we were thought of by many Vietnamese people. I never asked them quite. I worked at a Vietnamese restaurant actually, and I think that it was ran by three brothers, and it was owned by their parents.
Okay.
And I mean, these guys were old enough that they had kids. Like, they had kids my age that were working there. I was like 22 or something like that, or 20, 21, somewhere in there. And how
old were the owners then?
They were, so we called their parents grandma and grandpa.
Okay.
That was just like that's what I called them. My Vietnamese coworkers called them however you say grandma or grandpa in Vietnamese.
Okay.
I only learned a few words, but like, so I would actually work with grandma at lunch, and it wasn't a necessity for her to learn English super, super well. Grandpa could speak English really, really well. He just didn't want to most of the time.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But I kind of missed an opportunity, because it might have been nice to actually ask them, because they would have been pretty young during the war. But it would have been interesting to ask them what they thought, their perspective on things. Yeah, that would have been. They hadn't any experience with Americans then and what they were like. But I mean, they chose to move here, so. But it was actually kind of fun, like working with their mom, because the language gap was kind of fun sometimes, like trying to figure out how to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
And, but she spoke enough, like, to where, like, I could understand, like, when she was trying to say something, and like I spoke enough Vietnamese, like regarding food stuff, that like we could sort of communicate. But they used to make fun of how bad my accent was.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Like, no, my accent in Vietnamese is god awful. And I can only say a few words, and I don't remember much from when I worked there. But yeah, like I kind of missed an opportunity to ask them, what they thought, or if they had any experience with Americans when they were young. But I really do wonder, what the perspective is. And maybe someone had to have done some documentarian, I'm sure, has done some interviews somewhere. And that's another reason why I think people should watch this movie. It's because now we're interested.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
And I think it's an important part of American history to remember. Because if you forget history, then you fuck up a second time, or a third time, or a fourth.
Yep. Yeah, and it is. I mean, that's the point that I was trying to bring up in the intro. It is. I feel like I'm not. I don't want to downplay this movie. The movie was great, but it's most of what I want to talk about. Most of what this movie made me think about. It can be found elsewhere. The important really thing to me is the topic of exploring this, and not necessarily the plot points of the movie. Like, I am trying to, like, force myself to go back to discussing the movie, but I feel like the general point of this conversation is more just the concept surrounding war that the movie wants us to think about, I think.
Yeah. So if you're looking for a movie talk tonight, we're sorry.
Yeah.
We can't give you that. But if you want to watch the movie, you can.
Well, actually, I do have here. So one movie specific thing. How do you feel about the so we're becoming experts in this with Tarkov. How do you feel about the team kills that went on? There was a little bit of friendly fire that I would argue not accidental. I think all the team killing that I've experienced has been accidental, but yeah, the whole like Barnes killing Elias, like that kind of shit was very strange to me. I wonder how much of that went on in reality.
I think that as a filmmaker, Oliver Stone was trying to show you a caricature or a hyperbole of what was really happening. And I think that when, there's a very common thing that's occurred within the last decade where we validate experiences. We validate them to the point where we act like there's no way we can understand what anyone's going through. And there's some stuff that we can't. Like, for instance, I don't know what it's like to have cancer.
Yeah. I can watch any number of war movies. I'm never going to know what it's like to be in war. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like, I mean, I don't know, like, what it's like to be black. I can pretend like I do.
Well, you could paint your face, and then you would just know. Like, the world would treat you. I
mean, yes, the world would treat me differently.
They would, yeah.
But I wouldn't figure out. But like, there's certain things like I just can't. But I know what it feels like to have my heart broken. I know what it feels like to be cheated on. I know what it feels like for someone I care about to die. There's a lot of ways where we can really relate to each other. But war, as you said, this is something that we can't experience. So I think it seems to me that Oliver Stone wrote it the way he did because he wanted to get us as close as we could. So without experiencing it, I think he felt like he had to create this sort of hyperbolic idea. So yeah. I think that he was personifying the ideas, and that this person that's super convicted and this person that has some doubts, well, they just got killed by this person that's super convicted. And believing that much in a war is dangerous. And it's so dangerous, it kills the people that are supposed to be your comrades.
Believing that much in anything, I think, is very dangerous. There can be some. I think the number of causes worth believing that strongly in are fewer than the number that are not. And I think more often than not, people are willing to kill for a cause that is probably not something that they should be. But yeah, I do think, I don't know, it was interesting in the movie. I do like that there were some topics that were specific to the plot that it made me think. So then, continuing on with that, then at the end, Taylor killing Barnes, is that justice? Was that warranted then?
It's good script writing.
True. Yeah.
I mean, it creates a resolution for the audience, because the justice kind of thing that audiences seem to want when they're watching a film. I mean, as far as I see it, do you believe that the death penalty is a good idea for murderers?
Let me put it this way. I don't believe that the death penalty is a good idea for murderers. I think the death penalty is a good idea for the victims' families and situations. I don't think it does anything for the murder, but I do think that, yeah, I think that there are situations where that resolution does help people, I guess.
So it gives the family like a sort of kind of sense of closure, I guess, so to speak, for lack of a better term.
Exactly. Yeah, and again, this is not something that I've been through. So again, you're trying to like the whole episode, trying to figure out what it would be like. But I've definitely seen documentaries where victims' families have talked and said, you know, like I felt much better the day that I knew that the killer was killed.
One of my cousins, I'm wasn't very close to her anymore. We honestly really weren't particularly close. One of my cousins was actually found dead in a body of water a number of years ago.
Jeez.
And none of us have any idea what happened.
Huh. Where was that? Where were they from?
Ohio.
Okay.
And even not being super close to her, I still felt kind of like you want to know what happened.
Yeah.
You know, you want to have something, but there's like for her immediate family, I mean, like my uncle and he's my dad's brother. My aunt is not related to me by blood, but for the two of them and for her brother and sister, like I feel like there's a really, really gaping kind of openness to the wound there. There's no real resolution.
Yep.
And it's like a difficult thing to accept. So I guess by the same logic, maybe it wasn't necessarily a good thing for Taylor to kill Barnes, but it was good for the audience.
Yeah, and I would say it's probably good for Taylor. That was some sort of closure from that situation that he felt like he needed at least.
I mean, the way I see it, I mean, Barnes was okay with committing war crimes, and everybody was really okay with covering that up. And from Taylor's perspective, it's, well, if I blast this guy, well, then he can't commit any more war crimes. Of course, there's countless other people that are probably, going to, but not only was he committing them, but there's a scene where someone says, "Oh man, it's okay. Barnes will take care of it. Like, we'll be fine."
Yeah.
That he's not only is he committing the crimes, he's also covering it up for other people.
Yep.
And even like Elias's explanation that Barnes believes in what he's doing, like, I'm sorry, there's no level of conviction, I think, that would rationalize. Well, okay, maybe there is.
There is. Think of exactly what you were talking about earlier about how people don't understand what it's like to be in that situation and getting, and it's like, and I could see, like, is that what gives you the best soldiers, is knowing that, they don't need to worry about their actions. They can act uninhibited, and you're always gonna clean up their messes for them. Would that give you the best fighting for, you know what I mean? Like, I'm being devil's advocate. I'm not trying to like defend those Barnes's mentality, I guess, but.
Well, yeah. And there's a lot of situations where people believe that they're doing what's right. And in the situation, maybe to them it is. Yep. Like, like if you listen to Chris Kyle, when he talked in interviews, he just said he was protecting his team. That's what he felt like he was doing by doing like sniper Overwatch missions, was he was protecting saving American lives, I think is what he said. And so for him, that gave him the feeling that the idea, the perception that what he was doing was correct. But I don't know what it's like to feel that convicted about anything.
Yeah.
But I mean, it also depends, because some of the language I've heard like soldiers use for like shooting people, like that the enemy that they were fighting, like they say some pretty perverse shit. Like, it's pretty fucked up. And I think
you have to, though. Yeah,
you have no choice. I mean, there's no other way to live in a situation like that, and to do that as your job and be okay, like, without being that way. Graveyard humor is how they get through the day. And it's not just soldiers, it's fucking ER docs and oncologists and
but I would say especially with soldiers, though, because I mean, like, yes, doctors and anything like that, but they are still trying to medically assist someone. When you are a soldier, it's like, if you want to be like meticulous with rather than trying to be funny with what you were doing. It's like, oh yeah, I put a bullet through this guy's brain. You know what I mean? Like it's much like more gruesome than like, oh, I tried to save this person's life and unfortunately we lost them on the table or something like that. It's like, if you want to be like, rather than be like kind of funny or joking with it, it's like, if you want to get down to the details, it's like, yeah, you are like literally killing people. There is a reason for it, and yes, it may be making the world a better place in general, but it's like, in the long run, it's like that person was a human being that had a family. I don't think you want to sit there and think about that. It's like, yeah, they're not going home to their family anymore because of that. Like, so it makes it a lot easier to kind of like say it in a funny way and joke about it, rather than really thinking about the entire like the incident and all of the repercussions of it.
Yeah, I mean, and you can even see it like when Taylor, as the sort of the time goes on, and we're never given like a clear time lapse of how much time has passed. Mm-hmm. But as Taylor becomes more experienced, like there's a scene where they're, oh, sorry, that was gross. Hope you didn't hear that in the mic.
Well, no matter what, it was like under a year, right? Because even early on, he was asked how much time he had left, and it was 320 some days or whatever. So no matter what, it was like within it. It never showed him going for a second tour, so it was within that time period.
Yeah. So, I guess in that short amount of time, he got to the point where you can see them like when they're, I can't remember the scene, but I think they're ambushing an enemy force it's when they get ambushed, and then Elias takes them to kind of circle around and flank.
Yeah.
And then Taylor's like, I got 2 of them. I got 2. And he's like super excited about these people he just shot. And it's like, wow, I guess that's what happens.
Yeah.
And like I would really like to clarify here, and I think that I speak for both of us. I don't have some idea that I'm holier than thou. I'm not better than a soldier, someone that has to fight, no matter where they come from or who they're serving. I don't know what it's like. I'm not gonna try to make a black and white assessment of right or wrong.
Yeah.
And we're not judging anybody, and we're not acting like we know what it's like. And if we've come off that way, we didn't mean to at all. Mm-hmm. We really don't understand, and we're just trying to comment as best as we can and talk about the concepts as well as we can. So like, if you're listening and you're a veteran, we don't get it. So take everything we say with all the grains of salt you can get.
Yes. Yep. I would say, I mean, I want to add to that I agree with almost everything you said there. I do want to say there are situations of right and wrong. I do think, like in this movie, I think points even out in war, you can get caught up in situations that are wrong. The rape scene, I think that Taylor noticed it was like, like what you're doing there. Sorry, hold on. I'm meaning like the overall what you are doing there is amoral, I would say. You are a soldier, you are doing your job, you are killing, but there is a reason for that. You are excused, quote unquote, to do that. However, like committing, crimes within that and then raping innocents and everything, that is like getting caught up within a mob mentality that I do think is wrong. However, that does not mean that those, like the people that have done that are completely morally irreprehensible. Like it happens to humans that there are mob mentalities that people get swept up under, and they do things that they would never ever try to excuse their behavior, I guess.
Right. And I mean, any reasonable person would have a pretty like black and white perception on rape. Like, I don't think that any reasonable person has a gray area. Yeah. At least not in the groups that we inhabit. Like nobody has an idea. So like, yeah, I mean, well, if you're a rapist of any kind, we'll go ahead and just make the black and white statement that you've done something wrong.
No, exactly. Like, but the interesting part is when knowing it's wrong and how easily it is for humans to get caught up doing something they know is wrong simply because of the environment, I guess. Yeah.
But for veterans who have done their job in combat in the way that they're expected to and taught to, in the best conduct of the United States military or whatever military that happens to be, who have not committed any atrocities, we're not going to make any judgments. But
Of course. Yeah.
anything that a reasonable person thinks is 100% fucking wrong, well, sorry.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
Okay, we tied it up. That was our little disclaimer.
Yeah. Well, disclaimers are supposed to be at the beginning, right? Isn't that it?
Yeah, maybe we should have done that at the
What is it
beginning.
called when you do a disclaimer at the end? What is that? It's like a footnote.
Disclaimer?
Epic.
Epic?
I like epic claimer. Did you have any post-claimer?
I don't know. I'm just making shit up now.
Do you have anything else you want to get to from your notes?
There is one scene that I was kind of wondering about, and I kind of wonder about your perspective on this. Right before Barnes shoots Elias, why is Elias smiling? I don't get it.
I think, okay, the way that excuse me, jeez, I'm choking. The way that I read that, now, if I remember correctly, Elias pops out of the tree line. He, because that was the engagement where Elias went a couple 100 meters to one side in case they were getting flanked, and he was going to be their defense from that side, correct? And then Barnes was like pushing over to that side, I think, to look for enemy engagement. And I think that it was like Elias popped out of the tree line, like, you know, it's like, hey, we're good on this side. It's me. It's not an enemy soldier, in a smile, as in like not thinking that Barnes was going to shoot him. And then immediately, like in the scene, if I remember correctly, that smile kind of like drops to a frown when he realizes that Barnes is going to shoot. But so I think that it was kind of like a friendly, like, hey, like, you know, it's me over here. I got this area controlled.
Okay. Yeah, because I kind of, that seems right. Because I sort of had that thought, like, is it because he thinks that, like, you know, now a comrade is here and there's no one there trying to kill anybody and everything's safe and clear and blah, blah. Or is it like some weird thing like, oh, you just do it, you son of a bitch. Like one of those scenes, like, you know, the sort of perverse smile.
If there wasn't the quick switch to, like, if the smile didn't drop, I would have got that feeling. But because there was that split second of like the smile dropping off his face. Yeah.
So he realized what was happening. So did you also, one more question here. Did you notice Johnny Depp's tiny little role?
Okay, so I saw Johnny Depp's name in the credits as I was trying to, like, because you know how, like, when I put together the starring, I try to go to a few different sites and see, like, okay, who gave top billing, and then I try to, like, put together my top 4, what I consider. I saw Johnny Depp's name in there, and then while watching the movie, I was like, where the fuck is Johnny Depp? Could not find him at all. So no, I did not see his role at all. Where was it?
There was a moment where I was looking at one of the characters and I thought that guy kind of looks like Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp's the translator.
Oh, Learner. Yes, he is.
Speaking to the Vietnamese people in Vietnamese. And I don't know what a good Vietnamese accent sounds like, but he did okay. Yeah, because I remember thinking, like, he kind of looks like Johnny Depp. And yeah, because he looks like, as he got older, he began to look very, very, very different. But yeah, I think that was before he did What's Eating Gilbert Grape even.
Johnny Depp now looks like Marilyn Manson is playing Johnny Depp in a made-for-TV movie.
Yeah, like Johnny Depp looks like what Johnny Depp's corpse would look like at an open casket funeral.
Yeah, that's true. Johnny Depp looks like Willem Dafoe fucked young Johnny Depp, and the baby has now grown up into.
Johnny Depp looks like he's slowly becoming his character Edward Scissorhands. Johnny
Depp looks like he's preparing for Deadpool 4 to take over from.
Johnny Depp looks like he's wearing a costume to try to look like one of his own sperm cells.
How dare you? Johnny Depp is a handsome man, and
honestly, like, for his age, I mean, considering he's older than dirt now, like he's in his 60s, isn't he?
You know, you got me on that one. I'm actually not sure.
How old is Johnny Depp? He's 57.
Okay, close enough.
I mean, he looks okay for 57 and how many drugs he's probably done, I'm sure.
If I look like Johnny Depp looks at 57, I will be happy.
Yeah, I think there's photos of him and Charlie Sheen and the one Dylan brother that was in this movie, like partying together.
That's funny.
So yeah, that's happens when you hang out with Charlie Sheen. You do a lot of drugs.
It's the tiger blood, man. You just end up
You
winning.
know what? We didn't talk about how many people came home from Vietnam as addicts. There was a whole lot of drug use there, and they talk about the heroin, they talk about the coke.
Yeah, well, I mean, and there were quite a few scenes in the movie. Yeah, and that actually, you kind of touched on earlier. There was I think it was actually like way back in the intro, but there was a lot that happened with people being exposed to people of other ethnicities and other cultures in Vietnam. There was a mind opening that happened along with that. However, from what I understand, there was also a lot of mind closing that happened along with that coming home, because a lot of soldiers coming home with a drug problem that the older generation then blamed on, oh, well, they got that from insert racial group here that they met over in Vietnam, like, so it's like that ended up becoming blamed on the fact that they mixed with some other race and like they made friends with someone,
You got to blame them instead of the group of people that sent them over there.
Exactly. Yeah. Or, I mean, blame, like, other than just blame okay.
Or just blame the person that ended up on the stuff.
Exactly. Like, I'm one to, like, now I'm one to admit that people make choices within a set of circumstances. They don't make choices in a vacuum, so it isn't 100% that person's fault. There's definitely blame that lies across, like you brought up, the people that sent them there, the other, the others. But it is not just like, oh, my innocent Tommy got a drug problem because of, it's like, no, that's not what happened.
And I mean, I've quit smoking 8 times, so I understand stress smoking cigarettes. I think a lot of people came home from Vietnam smokers that were not previously.
Yep.
Yeah, but that's just another thing that people do and deal. And I think a lot of it has to do with sort of how lonely they felt when they came home, how opposed people were to the people that enlisted with the best intentions that ended up realizing that maybe what they were doing wasn't great. There's also that whole lone wolf mentality that a real man doesn't do this or doesn't talk about it. You just shut up and deal with it. Don't cry. There's a lot of stuff that I think contributed to the drug use and the continued drug use when they came back. So yeah, I mean, but that's just another thing. Like, war's fucked up. Okay.
But it would be like, honestly, like you said earlier, in multiple ways, it would be really cool to see what would the world be like without Vietnam. Mm-hmm. The drug problem. I wonder like how different drugs in America would be.
There's a whole discipline of like alternate history.
Yeah. Yep.
There's a couple like historians that sort of partake in sort of the hypothetical ideas of what happened. So there might be somebody that has an alternate history, like narrative of what they believe, the world really would be like without Vietnam. I'm actually now curious to see that. Thanks, Oliver Stone and everybody else that contributed to the film, because now I have a desire that I think is necessary to learn about possibly one of the bigger military blunders of my country's history. This is something that I think is important for us to learn about. So if the point was to get us thinking and get us interested, well, you guys did a great job in 1986. We're still talking about it in 2021.
Yep.
So you get 2 thumbs up from distance.
Speaking of alternate histories, did you ever see any of The Man in the High Castle?
No.
It was an Amazon, I think it was Amazon series. It was a TV series. It was actually based on a book by Philip K. Dick that did the old Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? But it was an alternate world where the Nazis won World War II, and it was like America after like basically like Nazi Germany and Japan split America, kind of like half and half. And it was like it's a really interesting series. But yeah, it came out in, I think it was 2015. It says here. I don't know how old the book was. Let's see. It looks like the book was nope. 1963. Okay, or 62. Sorry. Yeah, it was a cool series though. But yeah, a really cool idea. I like the whole alternate history idea. It's really cool to like the thought experiment of expand, like someone who knows a lot about history and knows a lot about how societies change can like think through that. It's like, okay, what would be the consequences if this didn't happen? One other thing that stood out to me I thought was really funny. This is probably really niche, but I wondered if you noticed it as well. First time seeing this movie, but I noticed a clip that I'd heard a lot from Kill Whitney Dead, that dance motherfucker. I never knew where that was from, and it was the Charlie Sheen shooting at the one-legged guy and telling him to dance. Like,
I did not, because I guess I didn't listen to them enough to recognize it. But
okay.
No, I didn't. I was completely unaware. There was some part of it that sounded familiar, but I think that was like a cliche from some Western films too. That they would do that shooting at people's feet. Also, that scene was super fucked up.
Oh yes, yep. That was horrible.
That was the first kind of that was actually when I sent you that message and said this one's a hard watch, was right after that scene.
Yeah, that was, I mean, literally like an elderly woman and a handicapped person, and going to like torture and kill them in front of yeah. Okay, so I'm done with my notes. You got everything worked through?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to raise or talk about involving the film. Yeah.
Would you like to do favorite line? Are you ready?
No.
You're not ready. Well, you know what? War doesn't care if you're ready.
I'm
war just happens, man. My favorite line I picked just because there was a lot of really good lines in this movie. I think the writing was great. There were quite a few monologues that were I don't want to use the word brilliant because that's just kind of like a lazy word, but just encapsulate a lot of ideas that were elegantly written, and I think makes the listener think. But all in all, I had to try to choose one line that really stood out, and this line stands out to me as an idea that I think the whole topic of this podcast, I think more people need to realize this idea. It's true in war, but I think it's also true just across the board in life. I think now, looking back, we did not fight the enemy. We fought ourselves. And the enemy was in us.
That's a good one. I consider that one too. That is a very like kind of on the whole idea of like, you know, the good and evil that kind of exists in all of us. The line that I chose was kind of, it's a really simple line. There are a few more around it, but I would have had to cheat and like skip other dialogue.
Yeah.
But this is a point in the film where you sort of recognize the character of the protagonist, and it's something that the audience wants to happen. And I think it's good that it was written this way. She's a fucking human being, man. Fuck you.
I actually have that line as the title of my section about that scene. When we talked about it, it was like that is literally the line that I have there. So yeah, that is a good one, man. Good choice.
Honestly, just trying to do the Charlie Sheen angry impression for that line was actually difficult. I actually feel very angry right now just doing that line.
But it is great though, because it is I love that line because we fail to see that the enemy is still human so often. And that is like, I mean, well, and honestly, I mean, fuck saying that even in that situation, because that person is not the enemy. That person is literally a innocent civilian.
Total
that is related to the enemy tangentially, but still, like, yeah, it is. Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, you ready to pick next week's episode? So I've got two choices for you here. We can either review a movie from 2020 while it's still pretty new and relevant, or if you want to, you can watch Ben Affleck suck a titty.
What is wrong with you?
I mean, is it a tough choice? I
mean, no, these are hilarious, but like, it's so. When does Ben Affleck what?
Well, if you want to find out, you can pick it.
But the thing
I guarantee it'll happen.
But there's also like the encroaching, like, while it's still relevant, like act now kind of thing. But I really want to know where the fuck Ben Affleck.
What does it say about you if you pick Ben Affleck sucking a titty over reviewing a 2020 movie while it's still relevant?
Well, one, it means I'm a shitty co-host.
That's not
Two,
true.
it means I don't care about valuable content.
That's not true. Dude, Ben
Relevant
Affleck sucking a
content.
titty is brilliant content. What are you talking about?
Three, it means I'm an 11-year-old boy because I can't resist the word titty.
That's fair. That's fair.
Actually, an 11 to 19-year-old boy.
I would say 11 to dead year old male.
Yeah, a human between the ages of birth and dead.
True. Yeah, not even 11 because like, yeah, titties are pretty irresistible as a food source when you're very, very young. Yeah.
Okay.
So what's the choice?
Oh God. Okay, there's two reasons why I'm going to pick this. One, I really do want good, relevant content. And two, I just don't want my mom to hear this episode if I pick the titty part. She'll be so disappointed in me. All right, yeah, let's review a 2021 movie.
Okay. And it's actually on yours, it's mistyped. It is a 2020 movie. But it is very, very new. Okay, so we are going to next week be talking about The Midnight Sky. 2020 film, Netflix original starring George Clooney. Literally a ball sack's hair away from 2021. This was released on December 11th of 2020. So right in the last 3 weeks of 2020. I think it's considered sci-fi. I'm not actually sure. Haven't seen much about it, but excited to check it out and see where it goes.
Dude, I'm so glad I picked that one because I'm very interested in this movie. It's
Sweet.
a very, very cool premise.
Cool. Awesome. Well, sweet. Then so next week we'll be talking about Midnight Sky. So guys, this is going to bring us to the end of another episode of the Metacast Movie Show. If you're watching this on YouTube and you've enjoyed the discussion, please hit the like button, subscribe to keep up to date with what we're doing, and comment below to tell us how you felt about Platoon.
If you think this podcast is dope and you want to keep up to date or even join us as a guest, please join our Discord. The link's in the description below. We will be live next week. Same bat time, same bat Twitch channel. Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on twitch.tv/TylaTV.
Yep. And thanks everyone for listening. Hope you all have a great week.